Okay, so let's go over this Mishnah again. We're going to start from the Mishnah, and then we are going to do Amud Yud Daf Yud Zayin Amud Bet today. So, says the Mishnah, Ketzad Eshet Achiv Shelo Haya Ba'olamo. What's the case of Eshet Achiv Shelo Haya Ba'olamo? So, says the Gemara, once we have this case, the first few lines are, everything is going to flow. It's going to be very easy. So, Shnei Achim umet echad mehem. You have, in the picture here, we have Reuven and Shimon, two brothers. Reuven is married to Esther, and Shimon is married to a different girl, Chana. Okay? So, two brothers, each brother is married to one wife. Reuven is married to this one, Esther, and Shimon is married to Chana. Now, met echad mehem. Reuven dies. V'nolad lahen ach. And then after Reuven dies, this brother Levi is born. Yeah. Then Shimon marries Reuven. He does Yibum to Esther, to Reuven's wife. Umet, and then Shimon dies. So now these two ladies fall to Yibum in front of Levi. Except the problem is they don't really fall to Yibum because this one, Esther, Reuven's wife, was Eshet Achiv Shelo Haya Ba'olamo. She was the wife of the brother that he never saw. And because she is not going to fall to Yibum, her tzara also, this other lady, Chana, who is Shimon's wife, even though this brother Levi and Shimon lived at the same time, but since she is a tzarat erva, she's a co-wife of an erva, so she doesn't fall to Yibum. Okay? That's the case of Eshet Achiv Shelo Haya Ba'olamo. Boker Tov. So Harishona Yotza Mishum Eshet Achiv Shelo Haya Ba'olamo. This lady, Chana, she does not do Yibum because she's Eshet Ach Shelo Haya Ba'olamo. She is the wife of Reuven, the brother who Levi never saw. Boker Tov. Vashniya Mishum Tzarata. And the second wife, this wife, she is the tzara, the co-wife. Okay? So that's the case of the Mishnah. Eshet Achiv Shelo. We did it before. That Reuven, just to reiterate, Reuven and Shimon were both brothers. Reuven was married to this girl Esther. Shimon was married to this girl Chana. Reuven dies, and then a third brother is born. So this brother Levi never met Reuven in his life. And then Shimon does Yibum, and then Shimon dies. So these two ladies do not fall to Yibum. Why? Because Esther was the wife of the brother that Levi never met. Right? It's Eshet, she's Eshet Achiv Shelo Haya Ba'olamo. She's the wife of the brother who was never in the world at the same time as Levi. So she doesn't do Yibum, and the Tzara also doesn't do Yibum or Chalitza. They're both out. Now, that's if Shimon does Yibum. Then she becomes a Tzarat Erva. She becomes a co-wife to an Erva. The Erva is Esther. She becomes a co-wife to an Erva. Now, Asaba Ma'amar. Let's say that instead of doing Yibum, Shimon did Ma'amar. Okay, what's Ma'amar? Ma'amar is some form of Kiddushin. That's not Deoraita. Mideoraita, it means absolutely nothing. It's all Midirabanan. Some form of Kiddushin that he does to the Yevamah. Usually generally Yibum is just Bia. The Yavam has Bia with the Yevamah, and that consummates the marriage. But if Shimon did not do Bia, he just did Ma'amar. He just did some form of Kiddushin. So Esther is not really his wife. This lady, right? He never did Yibum. She's not really his wife. So this lady, Chana, Shimon.
He did Ma'amar, yeah?
He did Ma'amar. So she's not fully his wife. That means that this lady, Chana, is not a Tzarat Erva. So she would still require Chalitza. She can't just go out and marry whoever she wants.
By Midrabanan, that's his wife, yeah?
Midrabanan, he's Mikudesha to Esther. But Mideoraita, he's not. So if Mideoraita, she's really not in the picture, so she can't make her Pitura from Yibum. She requires Yibum Chalitza Deoraita. Right? Chana. Shimon's real wife requires Yibum Chalitza Deoraita. Esther
Meaning if Shimon dies?
If Shimon dies, yeah. Because she's only if Shimon did Yibum to this lady who's the Erva, does Chana become the Tzarat Erva. Meaning,
What's the benefit of Ma'amar?
okay, that's a different question. We'll get to the sugya of Ma'amar. The point is, what we need to know is if he does Ma'amar, she's not his wife fully, and therefore she doesn't make the other wife Pitura from Yibum and Chalitza. So Asaba Ma'amar Vemet, if Shimon did Ma'amar and then he died right then and there, so Shniya Choletzet V'lo Mityavemet, the second lady, which is his original wife Chana, she's not a Tzarat Erva, she's not a co-wife of an Erva, therefore she still requires Chalitza. She can't do Yibum because they're kind of, he did Ma'amar, they're kind of like co-wives, so it's not right to do Yibum, but Chalitza she's still required to do. Okay, so B'ezras Hashem we'll get to all this. Amar Rav Nachman, Man detani Rishona lo mishtabish, Man detani Shniya lo mishtabish. Rav Nachman says that the one who calls this lady Esther, Reuven's wife, Rishona, right, the first wife, it's not making a mistake, and the one that calls her Man detani Shniya lo mishtabish, the one that calls her the second wife, is also not making a mistake. Meaning it seems like there were two versions of this Mishnah floating around. Some versions called Reuven's wife Esther the first one. Some called her the second one. He says either version is fine. Why? Mandetani Rishona lo mishtabesh. My Rishona linfila. She's the first, meaning first when it comes to nefila, when it comes to falling to Yibum. She was the first lady to fall to Yibum. This lady. Because first her husband died, and then this next one died. So she's the first one to fall to Yibum. That's why she's called Rishona. And
what's the reason she's first?
Because her husband died first, so she was the first one to fall to Yibum. That's why she's called Rishona. Man detani Shniya lo mishtabesh. The one that calls her Shniya is not making a mistake. My Shniya, Shnila linisuin. She's the second one to get married. Meaning, Shimon was married to this girl, Chana, and she's the second one to marry Shimon. So she could also be referred to the second one. Meaning, it's just semantics. Either way, that title works for her. Rishona works for her, and Shniya works for her. So the Gemara says, 1 second. Milo askinan diyibem v'achar kanas. This case could also be talking about a case where Shimon first did Yibum to Esther, to Reuven's wife, and then he married another girl. Who says that he had to marry another girl first? It's the same thing. He at the end of the day, he'll have two wives, one from Yibum, one not. So why should she be called the second one? Maybe he did Yibum first to her, and then he married this other girl. So the Gemara says, you're right. Elamai Shniya, why would Esther, this lady, be called Shniya? Shniya binisuin. Shniya means it's her second time getting married, because she was first married to Reuven, and then she married Shimon. Either way, he's saying either girsa that you have works out. Okay, now, let's go to here. Okay, so now the Gemara wants to know, Eshet achiv shelo haya ba'olamo hecha ketiva. Where do we have this idea that Yibum doesn't work? There's no Yibum by Eshet achiv shelo haya ba'olamo. By if a brother is born after his other brother died, there's no Yibum. How do we know that? So Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, Amar Kra. It says in the pasuk, Ki yeshevu achim. They take out the word yachdav. It says Ki yeshevu achim. When brothers are sitting together, it sounds like the brothers need to be alive at the same time in order for Yibum to be applicable. If one brother is born afterwards, he's not included in the parsha of Yibum. We learn from the Ki yeshevu achim yachdav from that pasuk. Shaita lahem yeshiva achat ba'olam. They were sitting together in the world. They were all alive at the same time. Prat le'eshet achiv shelo haya ba'olamo. This is coming to exclude eshet ach shelo haya ba'olamo, a case where one of the brothers was born after his brother died. So in that case that we had on the picture, Reuven died afterwards Levi was born. It's not considered ki yeshevu achim yachdav because he was born after the brother died. Okay, now the Gemara gets into a few drashos. Yachdav miuchadim banachala. Yachdav teaches me that they are together when it comes to inheriting. Prat le'achiv min ha'em. This is coming to exclude that there's no yibum by a brother who he only shares a mother with. If they have different fathers, but the same mother. It's the mother's second marriage, and she has one son from an earlier marriage and one son from this next second marriage. These two brothers are not considered brothers when it comes to Yibum. How do we know that? Because it says Yachdav. We learn Miyuchadim Banachala, that they have to be able to inherit together. It means they come from the same father. So Rabba says no. Achin min ha'av yalif achva mi bnei Yaakov. He says I have a different limud to tell me that they have to share a father. The pasuk says achim by Yibum, and it says achim by bnei Yaakov. So if you look at the thing, the psukim on the projector, it says ki yeshvu achim yachdav umet achad mehem. So the pasuk is talking about Yibum. It says ki yeshvu achim yachdav. It calls them achim. By the children of Yaakov, when they're talking to Yosef and explaining who they are, they say, Vayomru shneim asar avadecha achim anachnu bnei ish echad. They call themselves achim. Do they share a mother? No, they come from different mothers, but they share a father. So what do you see? You see when it says achim, it means that they share a father. So by Yibum also, when it says achim, it means they share a father. That's what Rabbah says. Okay? So malahalan minaav velo minayim, afkan minaav velo minayim. Just like by Yaakov, when it says achim, it means they share a father, not a mother. Also by Yibum, it means that Yibum is only applicable by brothers who share a father, not necessarily a mother. So the Gemara says, one second. Once you're going and learning from the word achim, so I have a different place that it says achim. V'leilif achva achva me'arayot. Why you learn from arayot? So by arayot, that's the third pasuk on the page over here. It says ervat eshet achicha lo tegale. It says achicha. Okay, you're not allowed to be with your brother's wife even after the brother dies. Now this is true by a brother not only that you share a father with, but also a brother that a person only shares a mother with. So the Gemara is asking, you're learning, achim, Yaakov, they only share a father. This over here it says achim, and it says achicha, and they only share a mother. It could be a case where they only share one parent. It could be a mother or a father. It doesn't matter. So don't tell me achim means from the father only. Maybe achim means from the mother only also. So the Gemara says, no, you can't do that. If we're learning from Yibum, we're going to choose to learn from Bnei Yaakov, not from Arayot. Why? Danim achim me'achim. Vein danin achim me'achicha. We learn achim to achim. So it says by Yibum ki yeshu achim yachtav, and by children of Yaakov it says achim anachnu. So those are the same word. We connect them. We don't learn achim to Arayot where it says achicha. It's a different word. It has the same meaning, but it's a different word. So we don't learn from achim to achicha. The Gemara says, "My nafkamina." What's the difference? It's the same word, and as long as the word has the same meaning, you could learn from one to the other. Hatana de Berbi Ishmael. We have a very, very famous teaching of Berbi Ishmael. It says, "V'shava kohen ubaha kohen, zui shiva zui bia." We learn a gzera shava from the word v'shav and uba. When the kohen returns and the kohen comes, it means the same thing. It's two completely different words, shav and ba, but the words mean the same thing, so we still connect them and make a gzera shava. So zui shiva, zui bia, he says the same thing. So over here also, achim, achicha, it's the same thing.
What translate for me, shiva or
V'shava kohen, the kohen returns. Ubaha kohen, the kohen comes. It's the same thing. Zoi shiva, zoi bia. Shiva, shav, and bia, and coming, it's the same thing. Returning, coming. Yeah. Hanimili, so the Gemara says, no. That's not an issue. Why? Hanimili hecha deleka mili damile. That's when you have no other word that's more similar. So then you can make a gzera shava between two words that are a little bit different. Aval hecha deleka mili damile. But when over here you have an option of something which is similar. You have achim and achim, or achim and achicha. So yeah, generally achim and achicha you can make a gzera shav. But over here, you have the option of something that's more similar. You have another pasuk that says achim. So midedami leyalfinan, we learn from the pasuk that's more similar. So we're going to learn achim from achim. So ki yeshvu achim yachtav, we learn from achim of Bnei Yaakov that it only has to be that they share a father. So the Gemara says, okay, I have another pasuk that also says achim though. Ve'leilif achva achva milot. Why don't we learn from Lot? Dichtiv ki anashim achim anachnu. By Lot, Avram is talking to Lot. The pasuk says, "Vayomer Avram el Lot, al nati miriva beni uvenecha uven ra'ai uven re'echa." Let's not have our shepherds fighting with each other. Ki anashim achim anachnu. We're brothers. Now they weren't really brothers. Avram was his uncle, so it calls him achim, even though they're not really brothers. So maybe we should learn from here that yibum also applies to a nephew and an uncle, just like Avram and Lot are called achim. And by Yibum it says Achim. Maybe we should learn from here that Yibum applies not just to brothers. So the Gemara says, Mistabra b'bnei Yaakov ha'ulei. If it makes sense to learn from Bnei Yaakov, why? Mishum de mifnei. Because that word Achim is extra. Since it's extra, I can use it to make this Gzera Shava. The pasuk could have just said, you could delete the word Achim anachnu. It could have just said, Shnei Masar Avadecha Bnei Ish Echad. They said, we're the sons of one man. It didn't need to say Achim. That whole word is extra. Therefore, that's the word that we're going to learn to Yibum, because it's extra. Uchtiv Achim. It says the word Achim at the end of the day. Shema Mina Lafnuye. It's extra. So at the end of the day, we have two drashas. We have the word Achim that's in red over here and the word Yachdav. We learn from the word Yachdav Miyuchadim Banachala, that they have to be together when it comes to inheritance, that we learn from there that they have to share a father. And we learn from the word Achim to Bnei Yaakov that they also have to share a father. So we have two drashas. The Gemara says we need both of these drashas. Okay? Veitzrich lemichtav Achim, veitzrich lemichtav Yachdav. I need the pasuk to write Achim to teach me that they have to share a father from Bnei Yaakov, and I also need the pasuk to write Yachdav to teach me Miyuchadim Benachala, that they have to also share a father. We learn that they have to share a father from both of those. Achim, that from Bnei Yaakov, that they shared a father, and Yachdav Miyuchadim Benachala, that they inherit together, which means they share a father. Di katav Rachmana Achim. If it would have just written Achim, Havamina Leilif Achva milot. I would have thought, if it would have just said Achim and it wouldn't have written Yachdav, this word Yachdav would have been deleted. It would have just said Achim. So I would have thought maybe to connect Achim to Lot and learn that it applies to more than just brothers. It applies to an uncle and a nephew also. V'chitema lo mifnei. Maybe you'll tell me that the word Achim by Lot is not additional. It's not extra. That's not true. La'aye afnue mafne. Really, it really is extra. Medehavle lemichtav re'im. It could have just said re'im anachnu. We're friends. We're family. We love each other. But it says achim. Uchtiv achim. It says achim. Shema mina la'afnuye. It didn't. By Lot, it also did not need to say the word achim. It's extra. Didn't have to say that. So the fact it says, the fact that it says achim, maybe is coming to teach me that I learn from there Yibum. So therefore, Katav Rachamana Yachdav. That's why I need the pasuk to say Yachdav as well, to tell me that don't learn Achim from Lot. It's Achim Yachdav. It's brothers that inherit each other, which means not an uncle and a nephew, but brothers that share a father that inherit each other. Hamiyuchadim Banachala. Vi Katav Rachamana Yachdav. If the Torah would have just written Yachdav, I would have thought that they need to share a mother and a father. Therefore, I need Achim to teach me no. It's Achim like Bnei Yaakov that they only share a father. So I need both of those. So the Gemara says, why would I assume that? Why would I assume that they need to share a mother and a father? Yibum benachalat ala rachmana. We said Yibum is dependent on nachala, on inheriting. V'nachala min ha'av, and inheriting goes through the lineage of the father. So why would I assume that they need to share a mother and a father? Inheriting doesn't come from the mother. So the Gemara says, it's derech. No. I still need both of these limudim. Because I really would have thought that there's a havamina that if it would have just said yachdav, I would have thought that maybe they have to share a mother and a father to do yibum. Why? Salka da'ata chamina. I would have thought ho'il vechidushu the Kamishtari Erva Gabe, since we're allowing the whole concept of Yibum is we're being matir arayot. It's his brother's wife, and we're allowing it. So Ema Adam Yachdi Ba'aba Ve'ima. Since it's being matir and erva, I would have thought that it has to be really, really, to do Yibum, it has to be his full 100% brother from mother and father. That's what I would have thought if it would have said Yachdav. Therefore, Tzricha, I needed to say Achim as well to teach me Achim min ha'av and lo minay. Okay, so Adkan is this part of the Gemara. What did we learn? We learned Ki yeshavu Achim Yachdav. Those words teach us a bunch of things. Number one, that Eshet Achiv Shelo Haya Ba'olamo. It says Ki yeshavu Achim Yachdav. The brothers have to be living together. A brother who's born later, he's not included in Yibum. Number two, Achim, we learned from Bnei Yaakov that they have to be brothers sharing a father. Yachdav Miuchadim Banachala. That teaches us also that they have to be sharing only a father. And the Gemara explained why we need both of those limudim. If I would have had one, it wouldn't have necessarily been enough. Therefore, I need both of those limudim to teach me that they have to share a father. Okay, next sugya is, we only have a few minutes. We don't really have time for a question. Next, because we have to get a little bit close to the bottom of the Amud. But the next sugya is, we'll get an introduction, we'll see how much of it we could do, but it takes us to the end of this next stuff. The sugya is the sugya famous machloket, going to come up a few places in Yevamot. Yesh zika or ein zika. Okay, so what is this concept? So zika, everyone agrees that when a person dies without children, his wife is connected to the family. There's something called zika. Question is, does that zika make her as if she's somewhat viewed as married to the family, and her relatives are going to be asurim on the yavam, or no, it doesn't really mean much. It doesn't really do much. So, in the words of the Gemara, this is going to be called yesh zika or ein zika. Okay, so this is going to be a machloket. Let's see at least the first opinion. So, Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. Rav Huna said in the name of Rav, Shomeret Yavam Shemeta. If somebody was a Shomeret Yavam and she died, that means you have Reuven died without children. His wife was a Shomeret Yavam to his brother Shimon. His wife now dies. Mutar Be'ima. He's now allowed to marry her mother. Okay? So let's just play this out for a moment. If he actually did Yibum to the girl, he's not allowed to marry her mother after she dies. A person cannot marry a woman and then when she dies marry her mother. That's one of the arayot. The only one of the arayot that a person could marry after his wife dies is sister. If it's his wife's, he marries a lady, she dies, he can marry the sister. But if he marries a lady and she dies, he can't marry the mother. Once there's a relationship between them, the mother is asura always. The daughter is asura always. Right? So, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav. Shomeret Yavam Shemeta. This lady, she didn't do Yibum, but she was waiting. She was in line to do Yibum with this guy. And then she died. Mutar Be'ima. He is allowed to marry her mother. So what do you see? Alma Kasavar Ein Zika. It must be that he holds Ein Zika. There was no full connection between the Shomeret Yavam and the Yavam and the brother. Because if there was, and they were considered somewhat married because of this Zika, then he wouldn't be allowed to marry her mother after she dies. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, Lema Kasavar Halacha Kedivrei Omer Ein Zika. Why is he saying this whole case? Why doesn't he just say Halacha is like the opinion Ein Zika? So the Gemara says, Ihava Amar Hachi. If he would have said Halacha is like the opinion that says Ein Zika, Hava Mina Hanimili Betrei. I would have thought that's only when there's two brothers that then there's no Zika, because who is she going to have a Zika to? There was a total of 3. The first guy died. Now there's 2 brothers left. So this lady, the wife of the brother who died, who's she? There's 2 brothers. Okay, in that case, she's not strongly connected to any one of them. Fine. But aval bechad yesh Zika. But I would have thought if there's one brother, there would be Zika. So the Gemara says, okay, still, velema halacha kedivrei haomer ein zika afilu bechad. Why didn't he say halacha is like the one that says ein zika even by one brother? He could have just said that. So the Gemara says still he didn't want to say that. Why? Yamar hachi. If he would have said that, hava amina afilu mechaim. I would have thought even when the Yevamot is still alive, he would be allowed to marry her mother. Meaning, if Ein Zika, then you have this brother who, right, his brother just died, Shimon, the second brother, and the Shomeret Yavam, the woman who's waiting to do Yibum with him. So if we say Ein Zika even with one brother, I would have thought that, you know what, I don't want to do Yibum to you, I'm going to marry your mother. I was dating your mother, I'm going to marry your mother. I would have thought that would be allowed even when this Shomeret Yavam is alive, because Ein Zika, there's no connection between them, and the mother will not be asura on him. Kamash malan lachar mita in mechaim lo. He's coming to teach us that specifically after the Shomeret Yavam dies, this lady who's waiting in line to do Yibum dies, then he could marry her mother. But mechaim, when she is still alive, when the girl is still alive, the Shomeret Yavam, he cannot marry her mother. Why not? Mishum de asur levatel mitzvat yivamin, because it's asur to be mivatel the mitzvah of yibum. Meaning, cases like this: you have two brothers, Reuven and Shimon. Okay, Reuven is married to a girl. Shimon is dating that girl's mother. Okay, Reuven dies, so now you have that girl Shomeret Yavam to Shimon. Shimon says, you know what? Forget you. I wanna go out with your mother. So if you hold Ein Zika, really he should be able to do that. The problem is if he does that, then he can't do Yibum anymore. If he marries this Shomeret Yavam's mother, then he can no longer do Yibum. If he can no longer do Yibum, he's removing himself from the mitzvah of Yibum. That we say is not allowed. Asur levatel mitzvat yivamin. He's not allowed to be mivatel the mitzvah of Yibum. Therefore, he can't. That's the reason why he cannot marry her mother, of the mother of the Shomeret Yavam. This is all Rav Huna Amar Rav. This is all Rav Huna in the name of Rav. Now the Gemara asks on this Tanan, Yivimto shemeta mutar ba'achota. So the Gemara says, one second, I have a proof against you. It says, if the Shomeret Yavam dies, he's allowed to marry the sister. Ba'achota in be'ima lo. He's allowed to marry the sister, not the mother. Because even if he was married to a woman and she died, he's allowed to marry her sister after she died. So of course the Shomeret Yavam, he's allowed to marry the sister after she died. But a mother, no. That no. So you see, not like what Rav Huna said in the name of Rav. So the Gemara says, no, hu adin afilu be'ima, really, it's true by the mother also. He would be allowed to marry the mother after the Shomeret Yavam died. V'idach, the Tana Reisha, v'aydi, the Tana Reisha, ishto shemeta mutar ba'achota in aval be'ima lo, dahavelei isura deoraita, tananami seifa mutar ba'achota. So the Gemara says the reason it chooses a case of sister really is true by mother also. The reason it chooses a case of sister is because in that Mishnah it's talking about the first case of the Mishnah is talking about a woman a man who's married to a woman. So if she dies, he could marry her sister, not her mother. So therefore, in the case of Yibum, it just continues with the same format, but it's just following the format of the Reisha. So there's a concept of Aidi de Tanare. Since the Reisha said it in this way, the Seifa also said it in this way. But Lav Dafka is it specifically by sister. So let's pause here. Let's just quickly recap what we're saying. So we're coming out. We learned the first opinion. The first opinion is Ein Zika. When there's a Shomeret Yavam, a woman waiting in line to do Yibum, her relatives are not asur on the man, but the man still cannot marry them if it's going to be a relative that's going to make him not be allowed to do Yibum anymore. Right? So that's the first opinion. B'ezrat Hashem, we'll review that and go on to the second opinion tomorrow. It's not so hard.
It's very hard.
It's not so hard.
Let me ask you something. You talk about the Bnei Yaakov, yeah?